So are we ready?
Are we ready? Yes, we are.
Okay, deep breath.
Hello, Marianne here. In this episode, we speak a lot about death and dying and grief. If you recently have experienced a death in your family, this might not be the right episode for you to listen to just now. But we do encourage everyone to bring death and the conversation about death closer into our daily conversations and not push it so far away from us. Grief is something we will experience with any loss. And Sophie has recorded a meditation on helping us to deal with grief you can find on our Patreon. A link to the Patreon is in the show notes.
Hello, Sophie. How are you today?
I am as best as I can be, as I am going through some grief today. Today or for the common following days, we just went to France, visit my family-in-law because we lost my brother-in-law. It was a very sudden death, and I was amazed of how important for me it was to be there with my family-in-law. First, we didn't know with my husband if he would fly alone or if I will fly with him. And somehow I was not excited to go there. You're never excited when there is a death, but I didn't want to go there because I didn't want to relieve the grief that I had when I went 6 years ago in France when my mother passed. And I was just freaking out just to the idea to go in the family full of grief. But when I saw my husband on the day we learned that my brother-in-law was passed, when I saw my husband, I said, I don't know why I hesitated. My place is here next to him, coming in France to France and support them. And I'm so glad I did because first I arrived full of strength, helping my father-in-law. He's 92 years old and he has a 5 son remaining, right? But he lost one. So I was there present for everyone, being kind in there, helping in there. And I think it was really a huge support. And I think that also my husband felt a little more free to be in the place he was because he knew I was by his side. For me, it was really empowering. It helped me to be closer to my father-in-law that I never was. When he saw me, he hugged me and said, "Thank you, Sophie, for coming." And he gave me an extra hug. And we have to understand that in my family-in-law, there is no excess of kissing or no excess of word, everything is in right place. So for my father-in-law to be so expressive to share, it feels great. And we went to church, and I'm not a religious person, but I'm respecting everyone's religion. So I went there and I'm participating with all my personal faith, my way to say goodbye to my brother-in-law. I think it was a very, very empowering experience. And I was crying, feeling pain for my family-in-law, feeling sad for because my brother-in-law was 55 years old, so you don't expect someone so young to pass. So it was, it was amazing in a good sense. I don't say that grief is over, but I think that the act of going on this trip was really helping to find inner peace.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I totally can relate to that. And now this is quite a while ago, when my mother passed away or died. I don't know. We have a real problem in our society to say death and dying. We kind of joke around it, and I do it most of the time too. But my mother lived to be 89 years old, and probably the last 10 years of her life, she was like dying. For one, she would always say, "Oh, this is probably the last time we see each other." And then she also had kind of given up on life and was kind of just sitting in her chair and not doing any of the things you need to do to keep yourself going. So I had basically every time I could travel, I had traveled to Germany to see her with the thought this might be the last time. So then when I heard said it might be the last time, I just wasn't sure if I should go, because so many times I had jumped on the airplane because it was like, oh, she's not doing good. It's a big financial outlay when you have to go to, especially short term, when you don't have time to look for the cheapest time to go type of a thing. And so my sister-in-law was like, no, you should come. And I'm really glad that I did, because we are 5 siblings as well. And we had been kind of estranged, not in a sense that we were hating each other, but we were just not communicating a lot at all. And we all ended up being there, and we all had a chance to say goodbye. I actually was with her when she left, and it was like a healing for our family to come together. And we made a real effort to try to stay very peaceful with each other and go forward doing this. So it would have been really easy for me not to go, but I think it was important to do that step of saying goodbye. In her case, she had been sick for a long time and was not living a life of quality. She was basically in bed needing medication to help with pain and stuff like that. So, it was different from what you experienced, having somebody who is basically fairly young. Even so, 20-year-olds don't think 55 is young, but we think it's young, right?
I think also that it's important to remember that whatever the age, the pain is always the pain. So 55 years old or 89 years old, the pain is the pain, right?
Right.
So sometimes we hear so weird thing when we are in the middle of a grief. Yeah. Oh, but she had a beautiful and long life. And what?
Mhm.
I'm still grieving.
Right, right. But I think we talked about that at one point. When your parents are older and they're leaving, that's kind of the expected order.
Yes.
It's more acceptable, I think, in the emotional mindset, to say, well, yes.
Yes.
And also, like with her, the fact that she really was not doing well and in pain made it easier to accept that was actually a good thing. And it was also very interesting because when I got there's a person, she is doing like different kind of therapy. But right when I got there, she did a workshop on death and dying. And she had been a nurse and had been in the hospital a lot of time with people which were in the transition phase. So she did this very nice meditation where you could visualize like a raven being ready to take off and move on to the next step, which we don't know what it is. If we want to say the next life or whatever comes after. But also talked about like the physical parts, that somebody who is ready to die does not like to be touched lightly. Said it's irritating. Said if you touch somebody, you need to have more of a firm grip, and also like to give permission to the person to move on, because sometimes people hold on for, like a mother for her children, for example. So that was kind of a space of having a very death positive attitude.
Mhm.
You know, if that makes sense.
Yeah, completely.
Which, yeah, when I was just saying that, I always remember our yoga teacher, where it's a studio where we met, who said that babies don't know that a life in the womb is leading to a life outside. You know, there is this trust of being born. For all we know, death is a transition into another reality. You
Yeah,
know, so
you know, I read a beautiful book from David Kessler, and it's called The Need of the Dying. And it explains how this transition and what are the subjects that we need to talk with everyone. You know, when I was with my brother-in-laws, the other, they said that they had a very difficult conversation by the end, you know, 2 or 3 days before Regis, my brother-in-law, died. They had a very important conversation about what do you want me to do if you need to be, how you say, if you need to sustain in your life, you know, like with all the machine and everything. And
right.
and he said, so you can reanimate me if I am to bring me back to life, but don't put me under the machine. And you know, I think that sometimes it's important to talk about those difficult topics, because when we find peace, you know, because then you don't know if you want to be under the machine or not, so you don't know what to do, and the person didn't have the time to express his will or her will, and then it doesn't go the direction the person wishes. So I think it's important to have all those conversation, tough conversation, but yet we find more peace and ease. And I think that in one way, for my brother-in-law, because everything was clear, when he went into a coma, my father-in-law with the other brother said, what do we do? Do we call the hospital or do we leave it here? Because he was in a clinic. He didn't want to go under the machine, so we will leave it there. And 24 hours later, he passed naturally, if we can say, but he was not under the machine. And I think that there is a lot of peace in that decision, you know? And
Yeah.
think that for everyone who is wondering about managing grief before the person is passing, then the book of David Kessler is really great advice. Great. It's not really an advice, but it explains and he shared his experience because he went into hospital talking with dying people, you know. As you said, we are born, we live, and we die. So it's
Right.
we cannot pretend that this is not happening, because
Right. Which I think we do as a society. We pretend it's not happening.
absolutely we
Yeah.
never think
Yeah.
of that, right? So we
Yeah.
never think. So I think it's important for us to say, hey, you know what? It will happen. If I see that it's coming sooner than later, maybe I want to talk about those important
Yeah.
topic, right? And let's do
Yeah.
it, you know. And I don't say it's very easy. I think that when my mother was at the end of her life, I wanted to talk about stuff, but it was hard for
Yeah.
me.
But I think it's definitely
Yeah.
for people which are having to make the decision, it's much easier if they have a directive of the person they're making the decision for.
Absolutely.
For me, this sounds like trivial compared to actually a human being going, you know, passing, dying. I just had to make the decision for my dog to be put to sleep, and it was so difficult. Just
We should.
being like the judge of death and life, going like, well, am I doing it too early? Does she still have a good life left? Or am I waiting too long? Said she's in unnecessary pain, which we don't have the choice for people. And that's something else to talk about at some point. Well, I guess some states in the United States have that choice, that you can end your life if you feel like, I
Hmm.
don't think we talked about that, but your brother-in-law had a stroke and he was diagnosed with cancer and told that it
Yes.
was incurable and said it had basically gone over all over his body, which might have caused a stroke in the first place. And all of that happened in a very short time. But at the same time, you all knew that there was all those conditions which had already predicted that life wouldn't be very long anymore, right?
Yeah, I think that the more challenging for us is that the evolve of all those news were in very short time, so in 3 weeks. So when you say, oh, it's a stroke, yeah, it's going to take time, but you can recover, and boom, there is a cancer. Okay, but they say it's treatable, you can treat it, and then boom, no, we cannot treat it. So I think that it was one disillusion after one disillusion.
Right. And having seen both of my parents die very slowly, my father had cancer as well, and it was so painful for him at the very end. Said, like, for myself, I'm hoping to have a faster exit.
Yes.
At the same time, I found out that you had a death in your family. I was having my dog, which, it sounds ridiculous. And I'm super surprised at myself how much grief I have been feeling. But I think also anytime you deal with death, you are confronted with your own life and end of life, that it will end. Kind of looking at like, well, how am I living my life? Now I'm here. I'm capable using my time I have to my fullest advantage, So I definitely had a lot of thoughts coming up, and looking at my husband who is also getting older, and and it's like you said, we have been pushing this kind of away from our regular living. And I thought that I had made complete peace with death and dying, because when I was in my 40s, I had cancer. I was on chemo for a year and just feeling very miserable. And so there was a lot of thinking about that. And I do remember I was on a trip to Germany, and I'm coming from a small town there where you can just walk into town and there are also shops. And Europe, at least the Europe I know, I grew up in, was a lot more stable in terms of the same shop was there for years and years and years, and you see the same people. And there was this small little store. I had walked by there many times, and the owner was usually hanging out, and you could say hi. And there was a yellow rose in the window with a kind of a goodbye message. And so I asked my friend what had happened. He had retired, sold all his things, was going to be an expat living in an Asian country, went on the airplane to go there, got off the airplane and fell over and died. I was like, and I had just come out of this being sick for this long time and still feeling not really great. And I do remember flying home, and my kids were with me on the trip. I remember the time in the airplane where I was like, I'm okay with dying. It's okay. It will come. And then now being reconfronted with having to make life and death decision, and just having all of that coming up. And at the same time, getting a message from you said you had to go to France. I was really revisiting that subject, and I'm not so sure I'm okay. I am right now today with that, like I'm in a struggle right now. I don't know if so much a struggle. I mean, we all know we have to die. That's the one thing we know for sure, right? So I think my struggle is more with, am I actually living the life I want to live right now, today, this week, this month,
Yeah, I think that really, if we are facing the reality that one day we are to die, So are we going to die, say, I regret that I didn't do that, or that I did everything I wanted to do, right? So I remember when I was raising my children, I was thinking, I need to be on top of everything and I cannot die until they are well grown up and on their path for their life, right? So guess what? I am an empty nester. I didn't job, right? I can pass tomorrow because I did my
Right.
job. Uh, now I am ready. No, I'm not ready because I think there is so many things to discover. And I think it's very interesting to realize that sometimes I am limiting myself and I don't know why, probably because I am afraid of whatever. So, but that's very something to ponder about, you know, that just to think, if I was going to pass today, did I do everything I wanted to
Right.
do? What can I do today to make it happen? Right now, it's not about achieving right away anything, but it's putting all the stuff together to go toward this direction, you know, because I think that sometimes we are focusing on the goal and we are not focusing on the present moment. So at the present moment, what do I do on my goal? Can I enjoy myself?
Right, right. Yeah,
You know?
I'm not even sure if it's so much the goal for me as enjoying what I'm actually doing. Because the more I think about, like at this point, I don't have little children. I have obligation to. I don't have a regular job. I have obligations to. I'm free to construct my life pretty much how I want to, right? But I find myself doing a lot of things because I feel I have to. And I don't know if that is just so much of the conditioning, you know, said we have to do certain things. I guess this whole week or 2 weeks of grief and life and death thinking brought a lot of that up again. It's like, what am I doing because I feel obligated and what I'm doing because I truly enjoy it? Obligation, you know, I'm talking not obligated to a particular person, but to the earth or to my idea who I want to be, or, you know, like,
or the idea that the society put on our shoulder, if you are not working for a living, then you have to be busy at home because you have to earn your place in the society. You cannot be a lazy one.
Yeah, like even things like I feel very concerned about our planet and our Earth. So I cannot, in good consciousness, throw anything in the trash which could be recycled, which is easy in places where you have like curbside recycling. This is just a stupid example, you know, it's not really on my mindset much, but I'm just giving us an example of feeling obligated. And so I will go so many steps to make it happen, which add a bunch of work to my days, which then might keep me from doing something else I actually want to engage in.
That is really a personal work to detach ourselves
Yeah.
from obligation. I think it's important to do the thing we do because it feels good to us to do it. Yeah, I don't like to put trash somewhere. I'm going to pick up the trash, but when I do and pick up the trash in the street or stuff like that, I feel good about it. I don't feel obligated to do it, you know? So it's finding the place where we can enjoy ourselves without feeling obligated to do it, you know? And I would say that end of the day, I feel I'm obligated to pick up the trash in the street. Maybe on that day, I don't do it, you know? And I think it's just about balance. You know, I think that's the thing. It's balance. Because when we put too much pressure, it becomes an obligation.
But that's, yeah. And that is definitely easy to put pressure on ourselves and put obligations on ourselves. We only put on ourselves. But that brought us away from grief and grieving. I wanted to say that I was surprised at myself how much I was grieving for a pet. I had been a little judgmental in the past when people were just falling apart because their cat or their dog died. And here I was like crying all day for a whole day. And I was watching myself and going, wow, that's really interesting. I haven't quite figured out yet if it's partly because of that being aware of my own mortality or the mortality of everybody around me, if it's partly having some guilt feelings that I could have been a better dog owner. You know how we tend to judge, well, maybe you don't, but I tend to judge myself harshly at times.
No, I
Yeah.
understand.
So anyway, so I just wanted to say how I was quite surprised at myself and still am.
Yeah, and I think it's very interesting to, as you say, you detach yourself and you were looking at yourself crying and surprised that you were crying so much. I think that first there is no level in grieving. Grieving is grieving, you know. You can grieve your dog, you can grieve your house, you can grieve your brother-in-law. Grieving is grieving. Now, I really like what you say about what do I really grieve about? Do I grieve for the company of my dog? Do I grieve because I have guilt that maybe I was not the best dog owner? Do I grieve because it shows me my own mortality? So, I mean, that's very, very interesting. And we don't have an answer because that's your personal journey. But I think that even painful as it might be, it's important for you to take the time to grieve, as it's important for me to take the time to grieve the new life without my brother-in-law. And so we figure out what does it mean for us. Maybe when we dive deep down in our emotion, not trying to suppress them, and really understanding that everything is valid, then we find inner peace, right? Because grieving basically is really pain.
Right, right,
It's just pain. So no one wants to have pain. So sometimes, and you know what? I'm just going to skip it, that part.
right.
And you know, on the day of the funeral, when I was crying, I don't know if I was crying for me, if I was crying for my brother-in-law, if I was crying for my family. I don't know. But I had to put that out. And it felt good to cry, and it felt good to bless last time on the tomb. And I think I went through all the ritual of this religious event, really for me to go through the process, And I think that ritual are great.
Yeah,
Ritual are great because they mark a time of an experience. It helps us to be more understanding with our own emotions.
yeah.
Yeah. So did you have the opportunity to do a little ritual for your dog or not at all?
So I buried her and I bought some plants. So I'm putting some plants on her grave.
Oh, good, good. I think it's so important, so important. She's because the spirit is already there, you know.
Definitely. Well, I think we better stop.
Yeah, I hope it will give some guidance because again, we should not be afraid of grief.
Well, it's very
Yeah.
true. And I think what you also said about crying, it's actually quite cleansing. I think sometimes when we have the opportunity to legitly, or no, I don't know how to, when we have a legit reason
I
to
don't
cry, right? Then maybe we also shed tears for many things we kind of suppress. When we get into that vulnerable space, it just kind of all spills over. Yeah.
And it's okay. I think it's okay. It's okay to cry. It's healthy to cry, you know. And I know because just as a reminder, as you are German and I am French, we are not people who are
That's right.
crying. So it's so not well to yeah, we don't show it, right? And yet it's so yeah, it's liberating.
Yeah,
It's
for
liberating.
sure.
Yeah, good. So a big hug to you for your
Thank you. And
dog.
big hug to you.
Here we go, and we have to find a happier
Yeah,
topic for
for
the
sure.
next time.
Yeah, let's definitely commit to having a happier topic next time. All right. Take care, everyone.
Yeah, bye-bye.
Thank you so much for sharing your precious time with us. We love to have a conversation with you, and there are several places you can reach us. One is Instagram, Explore SoMa Podcast. That's mostly Marianne speaking to you there. On Facebook, there's a page, also Explore SoMa Podcast, and Sophie is the one talking to you there. And then we have a Patreon account, Explore SoMa Podcast, and both of us are hopping in and out, and we are really trying to build communities there. If you want to join us, we would love it. And of course, you can support us there, but you can also be there and be part of the conversation. If there is no money in your pocket to spare, we totally get that. Believe us, we have been there. Thank you so much. Take care until we meet again.